1929, a little baby girl was born in the town of Técs, Hungary. She was born to a large and loving home with 11 kids, and she grew up happy and celebrated with deep religious and spiritual and loving opportunities in her home. At the age of 14, she and her family were taken to Auschwitz, and she lost 8 siblings and both of her parents on that day. She went on to get married. She moved to Australia. She raised a family with 3 boys. They made their way to New York. She lost her first husband when he was only 39 years old. She lost her first son at the age of 30 from cancer. And her second husband passed away 2 decades later. You would think that this would be a woman who would be filled with sadness and bitterness. But that is not who she was at all. And I knew her very, very well because she was my grandmother. When my grandmother moved to her condo in Brooklyn, New York, after losing her husband, my family and I went to visit her. And we had asked her, she had been living in Queens, New York before that with her 2 sisters, whom she had survived the Holocaust with. And we said to her, "So, Bobby," that's what we called her, Bobby, "looking back, are you glad you moved to Brooklyn?" And she looked at me and she said something that I have never forgotten. She said it in her thick Hungarian accent, and she said, "Ruchi," that's my name, "I never look back, only forward," which translated means, I never look back, only forward. I came to realize that that was not just a stray comment that she made. That was her mantra. That was her survival guide. That's how she got through everything that she got through in her life, which one could say was punctuated by loss and tragedy. But she refused to view herself that way. She refused to view herself as a person whose life was punctuated by loss and tragedy. She chose instead to identify herself as a person whose life was punctuated by resilience, strength, and rebuilding. And the way she did that was by looking forward and not looking back. Even sometimes when she would come visit us, and we would ask her questions about life before the war, in the good years, when her family celebrated holidays together and birthdays and other occasions, she would become overwrought and teary-eyed. It was just really hard for her to go back there because her life was predicated on moving forward, and she did it so well. She passed away less than a year ago at the age of 96. She passed exactly on the day of my 50th birthday, and I felt that she was sending me a message. The message I felt she was sending me was that she was handing me the torch, because her stories and her legacy had kept me going when things had gotten very painful and difficult in my life. As Barry mentioned, I'm the mother of 7 kids. Now, when I say that, people automatically envision 7 2-year-olds. So let me just assure you, I do not have 7 2-year-olds. My kids range in age from 30 down to 15. And yes, I am the very grateful grandmother of 2 little babies. Best stage ever. And in our life, one of our children has special needs. 2 of our children are addicts. And when I've encountered the painful and difficult parts of my life, I always pictured my grandmother. And I always thought to myself, if she could do what she did with the things that she had to deal with, then I can do what I need to do with the things that I'm dealing with. So on the morning of my 50th birthday, when the phone rang and I saw it was my brother, and my brother is always the one who calls me first on my birthday. You know that like one person in your life who like has to be first? Okay, he's the first. And I picked up the phone and I said, "Hello," because I was anticipating this joyous, happy milestone birthday. And he said, "Ruchi, I have not good news." And I knew immediately what he was going to say because my grandmother had been very unwell for a long time. I said, "Is it Bobby?" And he said, yeah. And I felt so disappointed that she had to pass on my birthday. But then I saw it with different meaning. She was passing the torch to me, and she was telling me, I want you to be the one now to share this message. You're taking the mantle and you're carrying it on for others. That it's not about what happens to you. It's about how you handle what happens to you. It's not, you can't change the past, but you could change the meaning of the past. You cannot go back, but you certainly can go forward. You can either wallow in your pain or you can figure out how to build from it. And that's what I would like to talk to you about today. Living with and loving your child with low syndrome. I just heard about low syndrome a short while ago when Lisa introduced me to this incredible organization. But I did a little research, and you know what? Even though this is a very rare syndrome, the truth is that humanity shares so many of the same pain and struggles. The actual details might be different, but the grief and the pain and the disappointment, and yes, the joys and the celebrations, those are universal human emotions. And there is so much more that unites us than that divides us, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So the first point that I'd like to make is about how you can't change the past, but you can change the meaning of the past. Let me explain to you what I mean. A couple years ago, my daughter and I went to Florida for winter vacation. I live here in Ohio. I live in Cleveland. And winters in Cleveland are not fun. So we went to Florida for winter vacation, and we stayed in a condo in Surfside. And we stayed in an Airbnb right near the beach. And as we're walking to the beach, I pass by what looks like a huge construction site. And it's all fenced off, and there's this huge hole in the ground, and there's construction trucks and everything. And all of a sudden I realize that this was the building in Surfside that collapsed a number of years ago. I don't know how many of you remember this incident. It was very tragic. People died, people were injured, and the whole building collapsed. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking to myself, this is actually fascinating. There is a hole in the ground. There used to be a whole building here full of people and families and lives. And the whole building collapsed, and now there's a hole in the ground. Now you can look at this hole in the ground and you can think of this in two ways. You can either say, this is the site of destruction. And it is. And there was actually a sign that said, this is the site of the former building, blah, blah, blah. And there's a whole memorial wall of the people who passed away on that day. And or you could say, this is the excavation where new building is going to begin. It's the same hole in the ground. But you cannot build a building without first having a hole in the ground. So the hole in the ground can represent to you everything that's missing, or it can represent to you everything that's possible. When I think of the day that we got the diagnosis of our child with autism, it was 12 years ago, and it was kind of like we suspected it. We thought that was the diagnosis that we were going to get. But somehow, when you get that actual diagnosis from an actual doctor, it just feels like an arrow to the chest. And on the one hand, I was so sad and I was so scared and I felt so overwhelmed by this knowledge that I was joining this ranks of special needs parents. But also the fact that it had a name, the fact that other people knew what it was, and the fact that other people understood me, that also gave me a tremendous amount of power and camaraderie and commiseration. And if it has a name, then I can do something about it. And now I can get these services and apply for these grants and get help and get services. It has a name. So on the one hand, it's like you're falling out of a window. But on the other hand, it's the beginning of the building. And that is so powerful. And the fact that we went through what we went through as parents and we continue to go through, that is exactly what makes us who we are. And I'm going to talk more about this in a moment. But first, I'd like to ask you a question. What is this? I know it looks like a brick, but really what you meant to say was it's a stepping stone, right? Yeah, it's also very heavy, and I schlepped it from Cleveland. Okay, this is a stepping stone. It's what I found in my backyard. You know what's very interesting about this? You can step on it to get to somewhere else to make yourself a little taller, right? But you can also trip over it, which I am not going to do, and fall flat on your face. It's the same stone. It's the same thing, right? This can be a stepping stone, and it can also be a stumbling block. That is exactly true of the challenges that happen to us in our lives. And I'm not saying that the difficulties that happen to us in our lives are bad things. I don't believe they're bad things. I do believe they're hard things. There's a difference between bad and hard. Bad is something that is objectively problematic. Hard means it's difficult. I have to work on it. I have a lot of feelings about it. I can have feelings of pain. I can have feelings of grief. I can have feelings of frustration and envy and sadness, all of which I have had as a special needs mom. But that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with my kid. That doesn't mean there's anything bad about his life. It's different and it's painful. But everything can be viewed as a stepping stone. It's a stepping stone for growth. Who gets to decide what's a stepping stone and what's a stumbling block? We do. Because it all depends on how you use it. When I think about the things that I've been through with my kids, and believe me, I've given you just the tip of the iceberg, there is no way in the world that I could possibly be the person that I am today without having gone through what I've gone through. But I became her kicking and screaming. All along, I said, no, this is too much, not me. I can't do that. I can't do autism. I can't do addiction. I can't do these things. It's too much for me. I'm just a regular person. I'm not someone Herculean. But then you know what happens? You just do. You know why? Because when you're a parent, you do whatever it takes to help your kid. Things you never thought you could do. Situations you never thought you could live with. Advocacy you never thought you were capable of. But you do. You rise to the occasion because you have to. And when I think about the me that I am today and the me that I was 12 years ago, I like the me of today much better. That's how you turn your stumbling blocks into stepping stones. And it's a choice. It's a choice we make. It's a choice we make mindfully and consciously. Thomas Edison famously said, I did not fail 10,000 times. I learned 10,000 things that don't work. I know as a parent, I have made probably more than 10,000 mistakes. But how do you turn your obstacles into stepping stones? You learn from your mistakes. You learn from your experiences. You figure out what works as you go. Because how are you supposed to know what you don't know until you know? You only learn through your mistakes. And of course, you can learn from the mistakes of others, even better. You can learn by coming to conferences such as this one, and by drinking in the aggregated wisdom in this room, and from the many professionals that you'll be hearing from throughout the weekend. And that's great. But there is nothing more visceral than your own mistakes to help you realize, no, that's not what I want to do. That is not how I want to think. That is not how I want to be. This is the parent that I want to be in this moment. So as we navigate uncharted waters, we learn 10,000 things that don't work. And that's how we got a light bulb. That's how we will get our own light bulbs, by trying 10,000 things that don't work. One of our kids, who was also on an IEP for other reasons, an individualized education plan, I'm sure most of you know that, he went to 8 schools. He's 24 now. He's great. He has a job. He has an apartment. 8 schools. You know why we kept switching his schools? Because every time we moved him to a new school, we learned something that didn't work. And every school that he was in, I don't believe any of those was a waste. Every single one of those schools was a stepping stone. We learned something new about him, about his brain, about his education, about what motivated him, about what didn't motivate him. Does he need to be in a big school? Does he need to be in a small school? Does he need to be in a place with kids just like him? Does he need to be in a place with more diversity? Does he need to be a place with more hand-holding, or does he need to be in a place where they leave him alone? The questions go on and on. Does he need to be in public school? Does he need to be in private school? And we only learned that by sending him to 8 different schools. Sometimes people who move to Cleveland, they call me, they're trying to figure out where to send their kid to school. And they said, I was told you know a lot of things about a lot of schools. I'm like, I do. Because I don't look at that as 8 mistakes. I look at that as 8 learning opportunities. And I also look at that as a set of parents who will never give up on their kid and who will never stop trying to find the right place for their kid to thrive. So I am proud of how many times we switched his school, because I am proud of our perseverance and of our commitment to his education. There are a lot of times when we actually don't know if something is positive or negative. It's really hard to know in the moment. Something feels really bad, and it's really hard to see, how will this be a stepping stone? How could this possibly be a learning opportunity? So I'd like to tell you the maybe story. The maybe story goes like this. There is a man who is a farmer, and he has a horse. And one day his horse runs away. And all his neighbors come over to him, and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. I heard that your horse ran away. That's terrible. And he says, maybe. And then the next day, his horse comes back and brings 15 wild horses together. And everyone says, oh my gosh, that's amazing. You lost one horse, but you got 15 more horses. That's great. And he says, maybe. And then his son starts trying to break one of the wild horses, and his son falls off the horse and breaks his leg. And all his friends come and say, oh my gosh, your son broke his leg. That's terrible. And he says, the next day, the army conscription group comes to draft his son to the army, and he can't go because he has a broken leg. And all his friends come and say, wow, that's incredible. Your son didn't have to go to the army. And he says, maybe. The maybe story teaches us that in the moment, something could seem really bad, but it might be the path to something better. And it doesn't pay to get so invested in the roller coaster of life, which can be exhausting for anyone, especially when you're raising a special needs kid. It can be exhausting to ride all the highs and plummet at all the lows. Because you know what? Oh, look what I did there. Plummet. But you don't really know. We don't really know. We have no way of knowing what's right around the corner. Our son with autism is coming home from college as we speak. You know why? Because school didn't work out for him again. Oh, that's sad. Maybe. We really just don't know. So when we look at the past and we think about the things that have happened and we say, oh, that's bad, that's sad, that's hard, that's destruction, maybe, or maybe it's a construction site waiting to see what can be built on top of it. Maybe it's not a stumbling block, but actually a stepping stone, waiting to see how is this experience going to propel you to greater heights. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to ask you to turn to the couple people next to you at your table. Now, I don't know if the people sitting next to you are people you know or strangers. It's okay. It doesn't matter. And I want each of you to share with each other, you can do a little exercise, 3 things about yourself that you consider a strength and 3 things about yourself that you consider a weakness. Okay? Ready? Go. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for your enthusiastic participation. So, anybody care to share? It doesn't have to be yours. A strength or a weakness that came up on your table. Empathy? As a strength and as a weakness. Interesting. Anything else? Procrastinator. Is that a strength or a weakness? Because it's a weakness. I don't make assumptions, What else? Loyalty as a strength, I presume. At least too excited in a negative way, like too agitated. Getting agitated too quickly, but things might change. Okay. Yeah. Overprotective. What's that? As a negative and a positive. Protectiveness as a negative or a positive. Okay. So, yeah, let's do one more. Being good at filling out forms. Is that a strength or a weakness? It's a strength. I mean, in today's modern era, it's a strength. Can I send you all my forms for my 7 kids? Oh, it's okay. So, what's fascinating when examining our strengths and weaknesses, and this is the second point that I want to bring to you. My first point was you can't change the past, but you can change the meaning of the past, which is an idea that I heard from somebody named Mort Fertel. He has a website called marriagemax.com. Very interesting. So my second point that I want to bring to you is that your kids will push all the buttons that you didn't know needed to be pushed. Let me explain. Or maybe I don't have to explain, but let me explain. So when we examine our strengths and weaknesses, we find something very interesting. Our strengths are typically what we bring to the world, meaning what we do professionally is typically something that we feel like we're good at, or something that others have validated that we're good at, right? Or if we volunteer, chances are we're volunteering in an area that interests us or a strength of ours, right? The places in which we thrive and the spaces in which we thrive that impacts the world are going to usually be our strengths. Bless you. What about our weaknesses? Our weaknesses is our place for the beginning of our inner growth. Now, what do I mean by that? Anyone who's raising a special needs kid needs to know something. I referred to this earlier. You will be a better person because of this experience. You will be a better human because of it. Whether you do it kicking and screaming, whether you're saying all along, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this, you will do it and you will be a better person on the other side of it. Why? Because whatever your strengths are, those are going to come to the fore in spades. And you're going to say, okay, here's what I can do. I can make phone calls. I can fill out forms. I can be patient. I can call doctors. I can, organize a conference. Here are the things that I can do. Those are your strengths. What about your weaknesses? What if you're overprotective? What if you get overly agitated? What if you get scared a lot? You have anxiety, right? What does that mean? That means that your kids are going to push all those buttons and they're going to put a huge neon highlight on your weaknesses, which is good. I know it's hard, and I know it's not fun, and I know it can be annoying, but that is good. Why? Because that's how you transform into a better person. Even becoming a parent alone has such power to transform you into a better person. Did you ever imagine that you could love a human being as much as you love your child, that you would do anything for them the way you would do for your child? Our 5th child, our daughter and son-in-law, just had a little baby girl. Today she's 4 weeks old. And I'm watching this young couple transform into parents, and there's literally nothing like it. You're a couple one day, and your parents the next day. And before my daughter had the baby and she invited me to come to the hospital with her and be her doula, which was such an honor. And she said to me, my life is about to change. And I'm thinking to myself, you have no idea. I didn't say that. I'm supposed to be supportive. But watching this young couple, they're young, they're in their 20s, turn into parents, and to be so completely selfless, and to get up multiple times in the middle of the night and change poop after pee after poop after pee after spit up. You guys remember this stage? And to look at her and say, I love you so much. I see there's a little baby in the back of the room. Right? That's just being a plain old regular parent. What about the parent of a special needs kid? Did you ever imagine that you could do so much, love so much, try so hard, be so patient, be so kind? You know why? Because parenting pushes all the buttons that you didn't know needed to be pushed. If you would have asked me before I became a mother, do you have anger issues? I would have said, no. Are you kidding? I like, people like me, like I'm a nice person. Well, please don't ask me that question today. Because today I do have anger issues. Why? Because I didn't know that I had so much latent impatience in my personality until my kids pushed those buttons. But guess what? I'm glad I know that now because I have done so much inner work because I've had to. That's the thing. You're not going to do the work unless you have to. Barry mentioned that I'm a parenting coach. So I support parents of teens and adult kids in their relationships, and I'm a relationship coach in general. But what's fascinating about parent coaching is that the parenting issue is what brings the parent to my door, right? They'll say, oh, Ruchi, I'm really struggling. I have a 14-year-old girl, and she's, just using a fictitious example, slamming a lot of doors and rolling her eyes and so disrespectful, blah, 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 blah. So fine, so we start working together. I got an SOS phone call from a client. I was getting on a plane. And she says, I don't know what to do. I just absolutely lost it on my 16-year-old daughter, and there's something wrong with me, and I need help. So we started working together. It turns out that the mom is a perfectionist, which there's nothing wrong with that. I happen to be a very proud, recovering perfectionist myself. But what she came to realize is that for various reasons, she has extremely high standards of herself and of others. And her perfectionism is destroying her relationship with her daughter. So pay close attention to what happened here. It was the parenting issue that was the neon flashing light that caused her to get help. But what came to light was that actually it wasn't about the parenting at all. The parenting was the symptom. The real situation were her own weaknesses, but she didn't know they existed until they came to a head in her parenting. So when I say that our kids push all the buttons that we didn't know needed to be pushed, it means that whatever you're going through with your kid, whether it's typical or atypical, it doesn't matter, that is going to be the peephole into the deepest parts of your personality. And sometimes that's hard to face. Sometimes it's hard to look at. I didn't know I had anger issues before I became a parent. But that's what prompted me to really take a good hard look at those anger issues. I didn't know that I was jealous of other people until my daughter became an addict. But I needed to look at that. I needed to pay attention to that. So our strengths are what will help us make the greatest impact on the world. But becoming aware of our weaknesses is what will allow us to make the biggest impact on ourselves. And it is, thank you, you're a sweetheart. And it is precisely those activities, taking the good hard look at your own weaknesses and your own difficulties, that is going to make you say what I said a few minutes ago, which is, when I look at the me who I was 12 years ago, and I look at the me who I am today, I like myself today much better. Because the person I am today, after dealing with some severe parenting crises, I'm a more humble person. Yes, I just announced that to a room full of people. The irony is not lost on me. I'm a more caring person. I'm a more sensitive person. I'm a more patient person. I'm a more open-minded person. I wouldn't trade that for anything. And I am grateful. I have come to a place in my life, and I'm not going to lie and say I feel like this 100% of the time. I don't, but I do feel like this most of the time. I am grateful for my challenges because they have forced me to become a much better version of myself. And for me, that's an extremely empowering way to look at the hard stuff that my family has been through. And I'm very proud of the hard work that I've done. and I give myself a pat on the back. You know, I have this thing that I do every Friday night. Most of my kids live in Cleveland, and every Friday night we get together, we have dinner together. And I have this thing that I do where I compliment my own food. I don't know if any of you do this, but like, you know, as I'll bring the food out, I'll be like, this is my line. With all due modesty, my kids already know the script. With all due modesty, the chicken is amazing. With all due modesty, this salad is off the charts. I'm always complimenting myself. And you know, my kids laugh and they make fun of me, and that's fine. But you know what actually is true? I am role modeling to pat yourself on the back when you've done something good and when you've done something right. And I don't think parents do this enough. If nobody is going to compliment you and pat you on the back, you compliment yourself and pat yourself on the back. And you know what? You don't even have to say with all due modesty. You can just say, I am a rock star parent. I am showing up. I am doing the hard work. I am amazing. Because if you're going to wait around for other people to say that, you might be disappointed. So why not just own it and say it to yourself? Acknowledge the hard work you've done on your own personality and on your own character. Acknowledge the obstacles that you've had to overcome and surmount in order to become the person you are. Acknowledge that it's hard. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging that it's hard and also absolutely loving your kid to the moon and back. Both of those things can be true at the same time. And there's also a deep sense of parental grief. I know this is something that's going to be addressed in a future session. But parental grief when things don't turn out the way you thought they might. It doesn't mean there's anything broken about what is. It just means that you thought you were getting something else. When I spoke about my grandmother in the beginning, and I mentioned that her son passed away, that was my father. My father passed away when he was 30 years old. He had cancer. I was 6. And that's a very painful and difficult thing that I went through. And a year later, my mother got remarried. My stepfather is a great guy. I appreciate him very much. But he's not my father, right? And of course, it's been 44 years that my father has been gone. Of course, I've accepted the fact that my father is gone. I am squarely in the acceptance stage of grief. And I still miss my father sometimes. And I still cry about him sometimes. And when my daughter got married and I was walking her down the aisle, and I was like, why isn't my father here? I miss him. I wish he could be here. And also appreciate the fact that my mother got remarried, appreciate the fact that my stepfather is in my life. Those things are not contradictory. So when you have a kid who is not what you expected, and it doesn't matter why, it could be because they're not well, it could be because they have a diagnosis, it could be because they're an addict, it could be because they're doing things that disappoint you. It doesn't matter what, but there is going to be a journey of parental grief. And that grief has to be considered, it has to be acknowledged, it has to be respected, and it has to be processed. And that doesn't mean that the child in front of you is not magnificent. It means that the other person that you thought you had or used to have is not there. Those two emotions can be so true at the same time. And the work is hard. And the acceptance takes time. And let's be gentle and gracious with ourselves to allow ourselves to feel all those feelings. And then we rise up like a lion and we take up the challenge and we show up as the best version of the person and the parent we know how to be so that we can be fully present for the child who's in front of us. So your kids, no matter who they are, will push all the buttons that needed to be pushed, because at the end of this, you will be a better human. And that's because it was hard and because it was challenging and because it was painful and because you were willing to look at that and work on it and to use your strengths to change the world and to use your weaknesses to transform yourself. So that's part 2. Part 2 is your kids will push the buttons. How are you going to utilize your strengths and weaknesses to make the biggest impact? The third piece that I want to talk to you about. So again, piece number 1, you can't change the past, you can change the meaning of the past, right? Piece number 2, your strengths and weaknesses, your kids pushing your buttons. Here's piece number 3. Piece number 3 is this. You've got to keep it strong at the top. Now, what do I mean by that? So remember when I said there's so much more that unites us than divides us. If you look around this room, you will see, and most of you are strangers to me, but I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that there's people here of different religions, different cultures, different ethnicities, different voting leanings politically. But you know what? Everybody who's here in this room has one thing in common. You are living with and or loving someone with low syndrome. That's what brings you all together. Now, I happen to be married. Maybe some of you are married. If you have a spouse, but it doesn't matter, it could be a co-parent, it could be a grandparent, it could be a friend, anybody who's helping you, you must pour as much effort and energy as you know how into that primary relationship at the top. And that is going to have an extremely powerful and positive influence on the whole family. What a lot of people do, especially when they have crises or special needs in their family, is they put all their time, effort, and attention on the issue. And they neglect all the other relationships, right? It's like when the body is in distress, the blood stops going to your fingers and toes because your body knows that it has to conserve it for the most important organs. It's got to be saved for your brain and your heart. So we do this. We triage. We triage in an emergency. And we say, my kid needs me right now. My kid is the emergency. When my son was diagnosed with autism, I stopped every extraneous activity in my life. I was in a band then. I'm a musician. I quit the band. I quit my hobbies. I quit my teaching my classes. I quit volunteering. I quit everything because my son couldn't be in school. I didn't know what I was going to do with him. We needed to figure out, was he going to go to school? Was he going to be in a therapy center? Was he going to be home? Were therapists going to come to the house? Like, I had no idea what I was going to do, but I did know that I had to triage. You know what came last? My marriage came last. And it was my husband, to his credit, who mentioned it. And through that, we learned something very powerful. And I want to share it with you. And again, it's not unique to marriage. It could be strengthening yourself through the people in this room. It could be allowing a friend into your life to understand you and help you. But this is extremely important. So here's my visual aid number 2. It's a little bit lighter than the brick. Okay, so I want to tell you about the cup and the bowl. If you want to fill up both the cup and the bowl in the most efficient way, what should you do? Oh, very good. I like that. Okay, if you have a cup and a bowl and one faucet, what should you do? Fill up the bowl, and then what? So you're saying first fill up the bowl, then fill up the cup. Okay, go ahead. Put the cup above the bowl, and then what happens? It overflows into the bowl. Okay, so the cup is your primary relationship at the top. That's your relationship with your spouse, your co-parent, your best friend, whoever's helping you, whoever is letting you be their partner in life, okay? The bowl is your parenting. What most people do when there's triage is they take out the cup and they just fill up the bowl because they just have to fill up that bowl. I'll fill it up as many times as it needs to be filled up. You know what happens? This cup, which is your own charging port, is out of the picture. If you put the cup in the bowl, I know this is counterintuitive because you want to save all your water for the bowl, because the bowl is the emergency. If you put the cup in the bowl and you fill up the cup, that means you fill up your primary relationship. You fill up the well of people who are going to give you support, who are going to strengthen you, who understand you, and you let that overflow and fill up the bowl. That is actually going to have the greatest positive influence on the bowl. You know why? Because your child will benefit the most when your cup is full, when you are actualized, when you are getting the support that you need. As I was driving to Columbus today from Cleveland, I was listening to an audiobook called I Can Fix This and Other Lies I Told Myself While Parenting My Struggling Child by Christina Kuzmich. I don't know if any of you follow her on social media, but she has a child who struggled with intense treatment-resistant depression, and she wrote this story with her son. It's a very, very powerful story. And she tells the story of how she was turning 40 and her husband was planning a big 40th birthday party for her. And there was a DJ and there was dancing. And then the next day, she and a couple friends were going on a girls' trip. It turned out that the day of her 40th birthday was 3 days after she had to call the cops on her son. They took him to the hospital for a 10-day psychiatric hold, and eventually she had to put him into a residential treatment center. And she kept saying to herself, how can I go to this party? It is just wrong on every level. And I don't feel like celebrating. And I don't feel like partying. And I'm going to cancel the party. And she said to her husband, we got to cancel the party. This is not the right time. And he said to her, don't you think that if you, especially now, surround yourself with all the people who love you and celebrate you, that is exactly what you need to be the best parent to our son? And eventually she did, and she danced. She danced until her feet were sore, and she was so happy she did. But she still carried a little bit of guilt. How could I do that? How could I fill up my own cup when my child is struggling? And it wasn't until much later that a friend of hers told her that when he was a child and he was in a lot of pain and he was in the hospital, that his own mother also, I forgot the details, went on some celebration, and he said, if my mother would have canceled her plans because of me, do you know how guilty I would have felt? And I would have carried that guilt until today. And what she realized is that she was actually doing her son a favor by filling up her own tank. Now, here's the thing. When we are co-parenting a child with needs, or we're in a group like this one, of course there are going to be differences, and it's going to seem like those differences divide us. My husband and I disagreed many, many times on what we should do with our kid. Should we do this? Should we do this? Should we use this parenting technique or this parenting technique? Even until today, even until this week, should we tell him he has to stay in college or should we let him come home? Didn't really matter because he just took a bus. So much for that. But of course, there's going to be disagreements and there's going to be arguments and there's going to be lots of things that splinter you apart. Don't give in to that temptation. You have to put your differences aside so you can fill up your cup, because if you fill up your cup, then you fill up the bowl. And kids know when it's strong at the top. And whether their parents are married or not is not the point. It's whether they can connect for them to make the decisions for them. When parents get strength from groups like this, and you permit yourself to open up to each other and focus on what unites you and not on what divides you, that's how you stay strong. And when you're strong, everybody's strong. You are important. You matter. Compliment your own food. Pat yourself on the back. Give yourself permission to be celebrated. You deserve it. So that's my final point, is focus on what unites us and not on what divides us. So let's review, right? My grandmother, who said she only looks forward, not back. Point number 1 is what? Can't change the past, but you could change the meaning of the past. Point number 2, kids will push your buttons. You'll never forget that one. And number 3, keep strong. Focus on what unites us, not on what divides us. I'd like to end with 2 thoughts. One is a quote in English, and one is a teaching from my second language, which is Hebrew. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail." When I was talking to Jerry, by the way, thank you, Jerry, for everything you do and for bringing me here. And Jerry was talking about this association and the research and the fundraising and looking for a cure. And then when I saw this quote, I was like, what a powerful quote. Because what all of you guys are doing here is you're doing exactly this. You're not going where the path may lead. You're not on a well-worn path. What you're doing instead is you're going where there is no path, and you're leaving a trail. And by doing what you're doing, showing up as the best parent for your kid, and your friends and family members who may not understand what it's like to parent in your situation, what you're doing just through your own life, you may not be the biggest advocate, you may not be the president of the organization, not the point, but by your advocacy, even just in your own home, your own personal strength whenever you can summon it, your own acceptance and joy in your own child, That's what you're doing. You're creating a new path. You know, when people look at me, and I have a child with autism and 2 of my kids are addicts and wah, wah, wah. But you know what? When people look at me, they're watching me to see, how am I handling my situation? How am I talking about my situation? And when I can show up, and no, I don't do this 100% of the time either, but when I can show up with strength and calm and pride in our family and in what we've accomplished and the hard work we've done, I am blazing a trail for others. I'm going somewhere where nobody has gone, because every situation is different, every family is different, but I'm blazing the trail and I'm creating a path. That's the first thing. The second thing is a beautiful idea from the Hebrew language. The way you say why in Hebrew is lama. Now, lama can also be pronounced lima. And when you say lima, the meaning is for what? That is an enormously significant difference. Let me explain. Why is a question that I have asked myself many, many times throughout my parenting journey. Why did this have to happen? Why did that have to happen? Why did this have to happen for us? What were the genetic, what's the genetic mix? You know, when you have 7 kids, you have like many different genetic stuff. And you're like, how do 2 people with the exact same genetic material produce 7 wildly different humans? My older son, who's 29, has decided to study bats for his doctorate, for graduate school. Pretty sure there's not a single other member of my family who cares 2 hoots about bats. It's just fascinating. Everybody's different. Everybody's different, right? And sometimes I'm like, why? Like, why did this kid this and this kid that? This kid seems to be succeeding. This kid is struggling. This is working out. This is not working out. The one I was most worried about 20 years ago is the one who's succeeding the most today. Why? But I came to realize that why is a pointless word. You know why? Because it's totally focused on the past. And you know why else? Because you'll never really know. You'll never know why. We're never going to know why. But if you say lema, for what? That's forward focused. Remember my grandmother? I never look back, only forward. Forward focused means this happened for what purpose? What good and positivity is going to come out of this experience? That is a good question. That is a powerful question. That is a positive question that galvanizes growth and action. So allow me to end with a blessing. May each person here be blessed with the ability to make meaning of your past, to allow yourself to grow from your children and from your challenges, and to have the power and the ability to focus on what unites us and not on what divides us, to be forward focused in your mission, and to become the best version of yourselves. Thank you for having me.